Kemi Adeola was born in the small agricultural village of Abulori, miles away from the hustle and bustle of any major city. The day she was born, the midwives gathered around the thatched roof hut, whispering of how she would be special. Kemi's mother, Teyo, had cradled her newborn daughter and stared into her wide, curious eyes, believing the same thing. In a place where many families scraped by on subsistence farming, Kemi showed early promise with her relentless curiosity. From the moment she could walk, Kemi darted between cornfields, yams, and cassava patches, peppering her parents with questions about the world beyond their dusty roads. Her father, Kunal, proudly said, "She's not content with small dreams, this one," whenever a neighbor commented on her quick mind. Though life in Abulori was simple, Kemi's spirit was anything but. She devoured every book she could get her hands on. An old schoolteacher who ran a rickety local library took a special interest in Kemi and often handed her textbooks that were meant for older students. Kemi studied them by candlelight, determined to pave a path to a brighter future. Night after night, she would burn through math exercises and English compositions, dreaming of eventually leaving the village for the city. One evening, sitting beneath the lone mango tree near her family's modest hut, Kemi admitted her greatest ambition to her childhood friend, Folake. "One day," she said, voice cracking with excitement, "I will make so much money that no one in this village will ever go hungry again. I don't know how, but I will." Folake believed her. "I can see you doing big things, Kemi. You're destined for more than just farm work," Folake replied, tucking a stray strand of hair back under her scarf. Kemi's parents tried to encourage her while staying grounded in reality. "Daughter, if you study hard, perhaps you can get a scholarship to a good secondary school," Kunal said. "We'll do anything to see you succeed." And so Kemi held on to that shimmering hope. Even under the scorching sun, with sweat dripping down her face as she helped her parents harvest crops, her mind floated far away, imagining tall city buildings and the promise of new opportunities. Her will to improve her life was as strong as the roots of the ancient baobab trees around her home. Little did she know that her path would lead her to highs and lows beyond her wildest imagining. From the dusty roads of Abulori to the glamorous city lights, her journey had only just begun. The day Kemi arrived in Lagos felt like stepping into another universe. The traffic was maddening, hawkers weaved between cars selling anything from soft drinks to phone chargers, and the towering buildings were a stark contrast to the simple clay houses back home. Kemi had landed a job as a sales assistant in a bustling electronics store on the mainland, thanks to a distant cousin who had put in a good word for her. Although her salary barely covered her cramped one-room apartment, Kemi's spirit soared. Every morning, she commuted in rickety yellow Danfo buses, clinging to her bag while swerving through jam-packed roads. Still, she found the city exhilarating. She dreamed of eventually attending university or starting a business that might lift her family out of poverty. One fateful Tuesday, as Kemi was arranging phone accessories on a shelf in the store, a tall, confident man in a sharp suit and shiny loafers strolled in. She greeted him with a warm smile. "Good afternoon, sir. How can I help you today?" He introduced himself as Bryan Okoro, flashing a grin that showcased his perfect white teeth. "I'm looking for the latest smartphone. I hear your store has good deals," he said, eyes lingering on Kemi longer than necessary. Kemi guided him to the display section, answering his questions about battery life, processing speed, and storage. Bryan purchased the most expensive phone in stock, and when Kemi handed him the receipt, he slipped her his business card. "Call me if you ever need anything," he said. "I see a bright future in you, Kemi." She stared at the card in wonder after he left, uncertain why her heart was pounding. In the weeks that followed, Bryan stopped by more often, sometimes buying trivial things, like new phone covers or earphones, just to chat with her. Soon, he asked her out to lunch at a fancy restaurant downtown. For a girl who had grown up on simple stews and rice, a dining experience complete with cloth napkins and waiters in black bow ties was beyond her dreams. Over pepper soup and jollof rice, he told her about his own company, a startup that focused on importing electronics. He spoke with such conviction that she found herself entranced. "One day, I'll expand across Africa," he declared with a wink. "And I'd love to have a brilliant mind like yours on my team." Blushing, Kemi sipped her water. "I'm just a village girl trying to survive in the city," she admitted, feeling both flattered and overwhelmed. "Nonsense. I see greatness in you," Bryan insisted. his voice low and reassuring. That evening, as Kemi rode the bus back home, she replayed Bryan's words in her head. It felt so unreal that such a polished, ambitious man had taken an interest in her. She didn't realize that beneath his smooth charm lay layers of manipulation she was too innocent to detect. For now, all she felt was excitement. She believed, perhaps naively, that she had finally found someone who appreciated her big dreams. Months melted into a whirlwind of dates and late-night phone calls. Bryan had an uncanny ability to make Kemi feel like the center of the universe. He showered her with small gifts, a silk scarf from a boutique, an upgraded phone, and told her stories about the future they could build together. Before long, he started speaking of marriage, painting a picture of a fairy tale life where they would be unstoppable as a power couple. "Kemi, imagine us building a business empire," he would say, stroking her hand softly. "You're the brains, I'm the man of action. We'll conquer this world side by side." In her tiny room, Kemi confided in Folake over the phone. "He makes me feel like I can conquer mountains. But I worry I'm rushing. We've only been dating a few months." Folake's voice crackled through the line. "Be careful, Kemi. Remember the story of that neighbor who rushed into marriage and ended up regretting it." Kemi brushed aside the concern. "Bryan isn't like that," she insisted, though a subtle doubt nagged at her heart. Her job at the electronics store felt stifling now. Every day, she gazed out at the city with bigger dreams fueled by Bryan's words. When Bryan talked about needing funds for his startup's expansion, Kemi impulsively offered her modest savings. "I know it's not much," she said, "but if you believe in it, I do too." Bryan's eyes sparkled with gratitude. At least, that was how it appeared to her. "You won't regret this," he promised. "When we make it big, we'll look back on this moment and laugh about how we started from scratch." One early morning, as the smell of brewing coffee filled Bryan's modern apartment in Lekki, they sat discussing the future. Kemi looked around at the sleek furniture, her eyes brimming with hope. She confessed, "I'm planning to quit my job. I want to focus on helping you with the business." Bryan nodded fervently. "That's the right move. You're wasting your talent where you are." A flutter of anxiety tensed her stomach. Would she be cutting herself off from a stable income? But Bryan's confidence was contagious. He had an answer for every concern. "Don't worry about rent. I've got you covered. We'll be unstoppable." So, she quit her job. She withdrew her life savings from the bank. She phased out communication with her old friends. Bryan had suggested they were holding her back. The speed of it all made her lightheaded, but he was so convincing, so sure of himself, that she pushed those concerns to the back of her mind. In Kemi's eyes, a grand adventure was beginning. She didn't see that this new fairy tale was constructed on a shaky foundation of overdependence, hidden manipulation, and illusions of quick success. All she saw was a shining horizon ahead, lit by Bryan's dazzling smile and promises of success. Barely 6 months into their relationship, Bryan surprised Kemi with a formal proposal. He rented a section of a luxurious restaurant overlooking the Atlantic Ocean. A small crowd of onlookers cheered as he kneeled, diamond ring glinting in the candlelight. Tears welled up in Kemi's eyes. This was everything she thought she wanted: love, partnership, a chance to build a future. She didn't notice the trembling in her hand as she said, "Yes." The applause felt distant, as though she were watching it happen to someone else. Later that evening, while resting her head on Bryan's shoulder, she admitted softly, "I'm scared, you know. This is happening so fast." He stroked her hair gently. "Fear is normal, sweetheart. But trust me, life waits for no one. You have to seize happiness now." Her mother's reaction was reserved when Kemi gave her the news via phone call. "Are you sure this is the right time, daughter?" Teo asked, worry etched in her voice. "I don't want you to get hurt." "Bryan is good to me," Kemi insisted. "He's ambitious and loves me for who I am. I know it's quick, but everything feels right." Despite her parents' hesitant blessing and the hush of doubt deep within her, she pressed forward with the wedding plans. Bryan refused a small ceremony, insisting on a flashy wedding in one of Lagos's most expensive venues. "We have to make a statement," he proclaimed, excitement dancing in his eyes. The weeks leading up to the wedding were a blur: designer dress fittings, lavish hall bookings, and endless planning. Kemi's savings dwindled even further, and Bryan's startup wasn't generating cash yet, which meant she had to pick up extra bills. "I need a little more until the investors come through," Bryan would say, offering that same confident smile that always calmed her. Still, with each passing day, Kemi felt an invisible weight growing in her chest. At her final dress fitting, she stared at her reflection in the mirror, a radiant bride in ivory lace, yet her eyes revealed uncertainty. For a fleeting second, the face in the mirror asked, "Is this real love or just manipulation wrapped in sparkles?" But Bryan's voice rang from the other room. "Kemi, come show me how the dress looks." And the moment of introspection passed. On the wedding day, as guests danced and the band played lively tunes, Kemi tried her best to silence the nagging worry. She recited her vows with trembling lips. "I promise to stand by you through thick and thin." The cheers drowned out the tiny voice inside, warning her to slow down. When they were officially pronounced husband and wife, Bryan planted a triumphant kiss on her lips. The cameras flashed, capturing her wide smile. The fairy tale, albeit a rushed one, was now her new reality. She silently prayed it wouldn't turn into a nightmare. In the immediate aftermath of their wedding, Kemi expected a honeymoon phase of bliss. Instead, she found Bryan's mood swings unpredictable. At first, his harsh comments were mild and passed off as jokes. "You're really not good at budgeting," he said one day, scrolling through transactions. "No wonder you were stuck in a dead-end job." Kemi let it slide, telling herself he was just stressed with the startup. She tried to laugh it off, but his criticisms grew sharper. He scrutinized her cooking, her clothes, even her pronunciation of certain English words. "Honestly, you embarrass me sometimes," he muttered after she mistakenly said offer instead of buffer during a conversation with one of his potential investors. She blinked back tears, apologizing repeatedly. The man who once praised her intelligence and potential was now reducing her to someone whose every move needed correction. Friends noticed the shift in Kemi's demeanor. She grew quieter, more withdrawn, rarely returning calls or texts. One evening, as she tried to share her worries with Bryan, he dismissed her with a wave of his hand. "Stop making everything about you. I'm the one working day and night for our future," he snapped. "But I'm here to help," she said, voice trembling with an ache she tried to suppress. "You can't help," he countered coldly. "You're just a liability sometimes." It stung more than any physical slap could. Kemi remembered how, months earlier, he had praised her as brilliant. Now, the same mouth called her useless. Afterward, he would occasionally shower her with affectionate apologies, telling her he only wanted the best for their marriage. "Look, I want you to improve," Bryan would say, hands on her shoulders. "We can't succeed if you're complacent. I'm just being realistic." Kemi attempted to salvage their relationship by working harder, reading books about entrepreneurship, memorizing financial jargon, and even practicing her accent so she'd sound more refined. She convinced herself that she had to adapt to Bryan's standards, that perhaps she really was the one holding them back. Yet, the more she tried, the more he found reasons to tear her down. Often, during arguments, he'd hiss, "Without me, you'd still be in that village, scraping for pennies." The words sliced through her, leaving invisible scars on her spirit. Still, a flicker of hope remained. Maybe it's just the stress of building a startup, she thought. Once his business takes off, he'll go back to being the caring man I fell in love with. Kemi's greatest fear was that, deep down, Bryan would never revert to that charming persona. Instead, his manipulative hold seemed to tighten like a vice around her heart, leaving her more isolated than ever. Bryan's behavior escalated in small but significant ways. First, he insisted on controlling Kemi's phone contacts, telling her that some friends didn't have the mindset of a billionaire's wife. He made her block former co-workers, labeling them as jealous or negative. Gradually, Kemi noticed she no longer received calls from her parents unless Bryan was around. He would take the phone mid-conversation, offering them curt updates and then ending the call. "They'll only distract you," he reasoned. "You want to be successful, right?" Her once warm apartment felt colder by the day. Bryan rarely ate meals at home, returning late at night smelling of alcohol or perfume that wasn't hers. When Kemi mustered the courage to question him, he scoffed, "I'm networking. You know nothing about how the business world works." As days bled into weeks, the emotional abuse took its toll on Kemi's self-esteem. She was constantly exhausted, plagued by nightmares in which she was trapped in a dark room with no doors. In her waking hours, she was haunted by Bryan's voice replaying in her mind, "You can't do anything right." One Saturday morning, she tried to reach out to Folake, using a number Bryan hadn't blocked. Her voice broke the moment Folake answered. "I'm losing myself," Kemi whispered. "I don't even recognize who I am anymore." Folake's alarm was palpable through the phone. "Kemi, you need to step back and see how toxic this is. Emotional abuse can destroy you if you let it continue." A sense of panic welled in Kemi's chest. "What can I do? He's my husband. I believed in him." Folake paused. "Marriage shouldn't feel like a cage," she said softly. "You deserve better." When Bryan found out about the call, by checking her phone logs, he flew into a rage. He ripped the SIM card from Kemi's phone and hissed, "You have no idea how much I do for you, and this is how you repay me? Plotting behind my back with that friend of yours." Tears streaming, Kemi tried to explain, but he stormed out, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. Left alone in the silence, Kemi felt the weight of her isolation fully. She realized she had nobody to turn to, no job to fall back on, and barely any money in her personal account. In that lonely apartment, her spirit felt crushed. Yet, a tiny spark of anger lingered, anger at the situation, anger at herself for allowing things to get this far. She couldn't leave, could she? Where would she go? With the horizon of her own future darkening, Kemi clung to the hope that something might still change for the better. The turning point came on a sweltering afternoon. Kemi had spent the day tidying the apartment, determined to do anything to avoid Bryan's anger. As evening approached, Bryan stumbled in, clearly intoxicated, his shirt half untucked and a mocking grin on his face. Without greeting, he collapsed on the couch. "Where's dinner?" he demanded. Kemi rushed to the kitchen, returning with a plate of jollof rice. He took one bite, grimaced, and pushed it away. "Tastes awful," he growled, throwing the plate to the floor. Rice scattered across the carpet, staining it orange. She froze, hands trembling. "Bryan, stop this, please. We can talk." "Talk?" he spat, standing so abruptly that Kemi flinched. "Talk about what? How pathetic you've become." Her voice cracked. "I've given everything for you. My savings, my time. Because you had nothing else to offer." His voice boomed, echoing off the walls. "Useless village girl. Who do you think pays these bills? Who do you think rescued you from your miserable life?" Tears gathered at the corners of her eyes, but she bit her lip to keep them from falling. "Don't say that," she whispered. "I tried to help. I believed in our dream." He cut her off with a harsh laugh. "Our dream? There is no our. It's mine. You're just riding my coattails." Kemi mustered a shaky breath. "Please, can we calm down and—" "Calm down." He stepped closer, eyes bloodshot, spittle forming at the corners of his mouth. "Without me, you're nothing. You'll go back to that village, penniless and forgotten. Heck, you'll die poor if you ever leave this marriage. Do you hear me? Die." Kemi's heart pounded in her chest, fear and fury colliding inside her. She'd never felt more degraded, more powerless. The tears finally broke free, streaming down her cheeks. "Bryan, you're drunk," she managed, stepping away from him. He sneered. "At least I can afford to drink something besides well water. Don't forget that. Now clean up this mess." He kicked at the scattered rice, sending grains flying. With that, he stumbled into the bedroom, leaving Kemi standing in shock amid the debris. She sank to her knees, fists clenching the soiled carpet. His words echoed in her mind like thunder. "You'll die poor if you ever leave this marriage. You'll die." Never had she felt more trapped. But she also felt a spark of rebellion flickering, refusing to be extinguished by his cruelty. Could she survive without him? Part of her still wondered. Another part, though, was awakening to a truth. She had to try, or she'd lose herself entirely. A week later, Bryan insisted they attend a family gathering at his uncle's luxurious home. Relatives and friends swarmed the expansive compound. The women wore elegant lace dresses, and the men sported finely tailored suits. Kemi felt out of place in her simple gown, but Bryan offered no reassurance. During the party, guests ate and drank by the pool, discussing politics, business deals, and the latest social scandals. In the midst of laughter, Bryan introduced Kemi to a circle of wealthy acquaintances. One man, wearing gold-rimmed glasses, asked politely, "So, Kemi, how is the business you're running with your husband?" Kemi tried to answer, "I'm involved in administrative tasks and—" Bryan let out a loud cackle, cutting her off. "Administrative? She hardly knows anything about business. She mostly just waits at home for me to pay the bills." A stunned silence fell over the group. The man with the gold-rimmed glasses cleared his throat awkwardly, glancing at Kemi with pity. She felt her face burn with humiliation. Feeling cornered, she forced a smile. "Actually, I contributed my savings to the startup. I just haven't been very visible." Bryan rolled his eyes. "Your savings? A few naira from a dead-end job? That hardly made a dent. Let's not exaggerate." Kemi's cheeks flushed even hotter as the onlookers exchanged uneasy glances. She could see the mixture of pity and derision in their eyes. Bryan continued, oblivious or unconcerned about her embarrassment. "I'm the brains, the muscle, and the money in this equation," he announced arrogantly, taking a swig from his champagne flute. In that moment, something inside Kemi snapped. All the belittling, all the isolation, all the tears. She couldn't endure another second. Without warning, she turned on her heel and walked away, tears threatening to spill. She headed into the house, ignoring Bryan's calls of, "Where do you think you're going?" Inside, her hands shook as she locked herself in a guest bathroom, leaning against the sink. She stared at her reflection in the mirror, a reflection that looked battered by months of emotional storms. "I can't live like this anymore," she whispered to herself. She emerged a few minutes later, determined. She found Bryan near the pool, laughing loudly with his cronies. Ignoring the bewildered looks of the guests, she marched up to him. "I'm leaving," she announced in a voice louder than she'd ever used in public. The music and chatter hushed. Bryan blinked at her in disbelief. "Excuse me," he growled, his eyes narrowing dangerously. Her heart pounded, but she held her ground. "I've had enough," she said. "I won't be humiliated like this anymore." Seething, Bryan grabbed her wrist. "Don't you dare walk away from me," he hissed under his breath. Kemi yanked her arm free. Heads turned, but no one intervened. No one came to her defense. "Watch me," she declared, raising her chin. She left the party, tears streaming down her face as she stepped into a taxi. She had no plan, no money, no place to go. But in that car, speeding away from the scene of her most public disgrace, she felt an odd sense of relief, like a door had finally been unlocked and she was free to step through it, no matter how terrifying the unknown might be. Kemi found herself on Folake's doorstep late that night, her eyes puffy and her heart still pounding from the altercation. Folake answered in her pajamas, surprise and concern etched on her face. "Kemi, what happened?" All Kemi could do was collapse into her friend's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. Through choked words, she explained the public humiliation and the final straw that broke her. "I just couldn't take it anymore," she whispered, wiping tears with the back of her hand. Folake guided her inside, settling her on a worn couch in a living room cluttered with textbooks and half-eaten snacks. "You did the right thing," Folake assured her, fetching a glass of water. "You can stay here as long as you need." For the next few days, Kemi slept on that couch, unable to face the magnitude of her situation. She had no steady income, no legal advice on what might happen in a divorce, and only the clothes she'd worn the night she left Bryan. At times, she felt a wave of guilt. Perhaps she should have given Bryan another chance. But then she remembered the hateful words he spewed and shuddered at the thought of returning. She knew that leaving was the only way to preserve the fragile fragments of her identity. Desperate for survival, Kemi picked up odd jobs around the neighborhood. She cleaned houses, washed clothes, and helped vendors at a local market stall. She earned meager amounts, but at least she had something to contribute to Folake's household expenses. Some nights, she would cry herself to sleep, haunted by the memory of Bryan's threats. "You'll die poor without me," she confided in Folake one night. "He made me believe I was worthless, that I'd never accomplish anything." Folake placed a comforting hand on Kemi's shoulder. "Words cut deep, but they aren't your destiny. You're stronger than you think, and you're definitely more capable than he ever gave you credit for." Despite her emotional wounds, Kemi found a flicker of determination warming her chest whenever she thought of reclaiming her future. She didn't know how or when, but she vowed she would never again be at the mercy of someone else's cruel words. She promised herself that she would find a way to stand tall, even if she had to rebuild her life from the ground up. After all, she had done it once, coming from a small village to the city. She could do it again, this time on her own terms. On a gray, rainy afternoon, Kemi trudged through a busy street market with a bag of groceries she could barely afford. She'd just finished helping a local shopkeeper who paid her with leftover produce. Her clothes were damp, her spirit weary, yet she forced herself to focus on her next steps. Perhaps find a more stable job, maybe rent a tiny room. Suddenly, she heard a distressed cry from behind her. Turning, she saw an elderly woman stumble and drop her handbag, its contents spilling onto the wet pavement. Passers-by hurried on, ignoring her plight. Without hesitation, Kemi rushed over to help gather the scattered items. Some pills, a wallet, a handkerchief embroidered with intricate patterns. "Thank you, my child," the old woman said, her voice quavering with relief. She looked frail, her hair a shade of white that suggested she was well into her 80s. Rain-soaked glasses perched on her nose, giving her a vulnerable appearance. Kemi offered a gentle smile, helping her stand. "Are you all right, ma'am? You shouldn't be out alone in this weather." The woman tried to straighten her posture, but it was evident she was struggling. "I needed some fresh air," she replied, breathing raggedly. Her hand shook, and she winced as though in pain. Kemi offered to walk her to a nearby bus stop. Under the meager shelter, she waited with the woman until a taxi pulled up. "Let me help you in," Kemi insisted. She slipped an arm around the woman's shoulders and guided her into the car. Before Kemi could step back, the old woman grabbed her hand. "What's your name?" she asked, blinking behind wet glasses. "Kemi," she replied softly. "Thank you, Kemi," the woman said. She fished out a small note from her handbag and pressed it into Kemi's palm. "This is for you. A token of gratitude." Kemi shook her head. "No, please, I didn't help you for money. Keep it." The woman paused, studying Kemi's eyes. Finally, she tucked the note back into her bag. "You have a good heart, Kemi. Bless you." The taxi drove off, leaving Kemi standing in the rain, water dripping from her hair. Though she refused the money, she felt an unfamiliar warmth blossom in her chest. For a brief moment, she had forgotten her troubles, focusing instead on helping someone else. She returned to Folake's place feeling oddly uplifted. Little did she know that this small act of kindness would set in motion a series of events that would completely reshape her life. Sometimes destiny comes wrapped in the smallest gestures, waiting for the right moment to be revealed. 2 months later, Kemi was hauling buckets of soapy water at a car wash where she'd taken a temporary job. She still slept on Folake's couch, still struggled to pay even the smallest bills. Each day was a grind, but she was glad she had her freedom. Late in the afternoon, her phone rang, an unknown number. She hesitated but decided to answer. "Hello." A stern, professional voice came through. "May I speak with Miss Kemi Adeola?" "This is she," Kemi replied, confused. "My name is Mr. Akand, and I represent a legal firm here in Lagos," the voice said. "I need you to come to our office at 43 Campbell Street. We've been trying to locate you for some time. It's regarding a matter of inheritance." Inheritance. Kemi nearly dropped the phone. She had no wealthy relatives, no knowledge of any estate. Could this be a scam? Wiping her hands on her apron, she asked, "Are you sure it's me?" "Yes, Miss Adeola," Mr. Ackend confirmed. "You're the sole beneficiary of the estate of one Mrs. Aladunny Williams. She passed away last month." Kemi's mind raced. The name sounded vaguely familiar, and then it clicked, the elderly woman she'd helped on that rainy day. She felt her heart pound. "I'll come by," she managed, voice shaking. When she arrived at the law office, it felt surreal stepping into the sleek lobby, where polished floors reflected bright overhead lights. A receptionist directed her to a conference room, and once seated, she faced two lawyers, one of whom was the man she had spoken with on the phone. He cleared his throat, adjusting his glasses. Mrs. Aladunny Williams was a very private individual, but her portfolio was extensive. She owned properties, companies, and substantial financial assets. Kemi felt dizzy. She barely knew me." "You assisted her in a difficult moment," Mr. Ackend continued, sliding several documents across the table. "She was deeply moved by your kindness and humility. She had no close family to whom she wished to leave her estate. Therefore, she decided to bequeath it to you." It sounded like a plot out of a movie. Kemi's eyes darted over the documents in disbelief. Real estate holdings, a resort chain, a fashion line, its total valuation was in the billions. She stared at the lawyers, her breath catching. I don't understand." Another lawyer spoke gently. "Mrs. Williams has left explicit instructions. There is a letter in here, addressed to you. We strongly advise that you consider your next steps carefully, as inheriting such a fortune carries responsibilities." Hands trembling, Kemi opened the letter. "My dear Kemi, in you, I saw a light the day you helped me. A genuine heart, unspoiled by greed or selfishness. You reminded me of the person I once was. I leave you this fortune not to burden you, but to free you, so that your goodness can flourish and touch others. Make me proud. Yours in spirit, Aladunny Williams." The tears came unbidden. In a moment, her entire reality had flipped. She couldn't fathom how one act of kindness had led to this unimaginable bounty. Time seemed to stand still as she absorbed the magnitude of it all. She was no longer the homeless, helpless girl Bryan had predicted would die poor. She was now the sole heir of a billion-dollar empire, and nothing would ever be the same again. Kemi felt like she was in a dream. The day after she signed the initial inheritance paperwork, she woke up in Folake's living room, heart pounding with the possibility of what lay ahead. Could she really own entire chains of businesses and massive bank accounts? It didn't take long for the news to leak out. By the end of the week, local tabloids splashed her face with headlines like, "Sales Girl Inherits Billionaire Fortune." Strangers on social media debated her worthiness. Some accused her of gold digging, others called it fate. She remained quiet for several days, overwhelmed by the sudden attention. Meanwhile, Mr. Ackend guided her through additional legal steps. She found herself signing documents in boardrooms filled with people who addressed her as Ma. She attended a meeting with the senior management of the late Mrs. Williams's resort chain, who promised their full cooperation. In her heart, Kemi was both excited and terrified. The abruptness of this elevation felt disorienting. She had always dreamed of success, but never imagined it arriving like a lightning bolt from a stranger's will. On a humid afternoon, she took Folake to see one of the newly inherited properties, a 25-story office building in Victoria Island. They rode the glass elevator up to the top floor. The staff they met bowed their heads respectfully, offering warm smiles. When Kemi stepped onto the private penthouse suite, once occupied by Mrs. Williams, she was greeted by panoramic views of the Lagos skyline. Folake stood speechless, spinning around to take in the lavish interior. "Kemi, this is all yours," she whispered, tears glistening in her eyes. Kemi's own tears threatened to spill over. "I still can't believe it." She ran her fingers over the marble countertop. "It feels like someone else's life." Folake wrapped an arm around her. "You worked hard, and you have a good heart. Maybe this is the universe's way of rewarding you for everything you've been through." Images of Bryan's sneer flashed in Kemi's mind, and she shivered. "He said I'd die without him." She drew a shaky breath. I'm more alive now than ever. And I want to use this chance for good. Folake's eyes shone with pride. I know you will. That night, Kemi lay awake in a plush king-sized bed inside the penthouse suite. She stared at the ceiling, still grappling with her new reality. She remembered her vow to never again let anyone control her life. She remembered her humble beginnings in Abulori, the nights she read by candlelight, the heartbreak she suffered at Bryan's hands. With a resolute exhale, she murmured into the quiet room, I won't waste this gift. Tomorrow, she would meet with more legal advisors to finalize the rest of her inheritance. She needed to strategize, learn, and grow into her role. This was only the beginning of her transformation, from dust to destiny. Kemi wasted no time. Though she was inexperienced in high-level business, she was determined to learn. She immersed herself in management books, online courses, and late-night study sessions. The newly assembled executive team, initially skeptical of her background, soon discovered her sharp intellect and decisive leadership. She tackled the conglomerate's various sectors, resorts, fashion, and real estate, one at a time. First, she visited every resort under the Williams brand, traveling from the scenic coastlines in Nigeria to exotic international locations. She asked questions, listened to employee concerns, and took meticulous notes. It's important that we maintain the legacy of Mrs. Williams, she told a group of managers during a conference call. But we must also innovate. I want fresh ideas, new marketing strategies, and expanded social media presence. Word spread quickly about the new boss who wasn't afraid to roll up her sleeves. She fired incompetent senior managers who tried to defraud the company or resisted the changes she proposed. We don't have space for unethical practices, she announced at a board meeting, eyes flashing with the authority that belied her humble origins. She also poured resources into the fashion line. Rebranding it as Adeola Couture, she introduced stylish yet affordable designs inspired by her Yoruba heritage, fused with modern trends. The media buzzed with excitement over the brand's bold new direction. Kemi found a renewed sense of purpose in building something that reflected her vision. During a meeting with top fashion influencers, she explained, I grew up in a village where we had to make the most of every piece of cloth. I want my line to be accessible to everyone, not just the elite. Her words resonated, and online chatter exploded with praise for the new billionaire on the block. Some critics dismissed her as a novelty act, just a lucky girl who stumbled into wealth. Kemi used their doubt to fuel her motivation. She was determined to prove that her success wasn't a fluke. Her old nightmares of Bryan's raging face now served as a reminder of what she'd overcome. She didn't cower when men in suits tried to undermine her authority. She didn't doubt herself when tabloids questioned her business acumen. She pressed forward, forging alliances with influential partners and leveraging the brand's existing goodwill. In just months, under her leadership, profitability spiked, and the conglomerate soared to new heights. The Kemi Adeola phenomenon became a headline story on business channels. Still, she knew this was only the beginning. The real challenge was making sure the empire she was building was both sustainable and meaningful. One late evening, after a long day of meetings, she stood in her penthouse, gazing out at the twinkling city lights. She sipped tea thoughtfully, feeling a wave of gratitude. I'm not just living, I'm thriving, she murmured. And she vowed to never let anyone belittle her again. Once the initial flurry of local press had quieted, the story took on an international life of its own. Global business networks began to feature Kemi, labeling her the surprise billionaire from Nigeria. She received invitations to speak at conferences, guest appearances on talk shows, and interviews in glossy magazines. Each time, Kemi handled the spotlight with a mixture of humility and poise. The first time she traveled to London for a high-profile interview, she felt butterflies flutter in her stomach. Dressed in a sleek Adeola Couture ensemble, she stepped onto the set of a prominent global news channel. The host introduced her as a rags-to-riches legend, a phrase that made her cringe slightly, yet she understood the appeal of her story. "Tell us about your journey," the host asked, leaning forward. "How does one go from near homelessness to heading a billion-dollar conglomerate?" Kemi smiled, her words carefully measured. "Hard work, faith, and a bit of destiny, perhaps," she said. "But more than anything, I believe in staying true to who you are and never letting anyone's negative perception define you." Clips of that interview went viral. Viewers admired her sincerity and the unwavering calm in her voice. She wasn't boastful, nor did she shy away from acknowledging that luck played a part. Soon, hashtags celebrating her achievements trended on social media. In Lagos, her name sparkled on billboards advertising the newly launched Adeola Couture collection. The resorts under her care saw a surge in bookings from foreign tourists who wanted to experience the brand of this intriguing new mogul. Even men in the boardrooms she once felt intimidated by took her seriously, aware that her influence was growing by the day. "Madam, we have a request from the African Business League. They want you to give the keynote speech," her personal assistant announced one morning, scanning an electronic tablet. Kemi nodded, a sense of pride flooding through her. "Let's schedule it. It'll be an honor to share my story and maybe inspire others." Yet, in quiet moments, when the cameras were gone and the social media applause faded, she remembered the time she was belittled and bullied. She used those memories to fuel her current mission. If she could rise from the ashes, perhaps she could help others do the same. She also felt a twinge of anticipation for the day Bryan would inevitably see her on a global platform. The day he would realize just how wrong he had been about her. But more than seeking revenge, Kemi wanted her success to be a testament that no one can define you but yourself. By the end of that year, Kemi's face was featured on the cover of Global Power Women magazine. She gazed at it with a mix of disbelief and satisfaction, remembering every challenge she had endured. Her story had resonated worldwide, and the world was now watching her every move. While Kemi soared to extraordinary heights, Bryan spiraled into a pit of failures. His company, which once showed promise on the surface, was rotting from within due to poor decisions and reckless spending. Investors pulled out, citing mistrust in his leadership. Debts piled up, and he struggled to even pay the rent for his upscale apartment. He lost key clients who questioned his reliability. Rumors circulated about how he treated business partners, with stories of arrogance and dishonesty spreading among the local startup community. Potential new investors steered clear. As the months passed, Bryan found himself drowning in overdue bills. Creditors called day and night, demanding payment. His fancy car got repossessed one afternoon, leaving him to shamefully hail a taxi. His social life also disintegrated. The women he used to party with vanished when the free champagne and plush penthouse gatherings dried up. Even his so-called friends stopped picking up his calls. Desperate, he tried to connect with distant relatives, but no one wanted to bail him out. "You made your bed, Bryan," one cousin muttered over the phone, ending the call abruptly. Staring at the eviction notice pinned to his apartment door, Bryan felt panic well up. How did it come to this? He wondered, though a small part of him still insisted it was just a temporary setback. He couldn't stop thinking about Kemi, the girl he once called useless. The news channels were buzzing with her achievements. Billboards featuring her new fashion line surrounded him at every major intersection. Every image felt like a taunt, a mirror reflecting his own failures back at him. "No, this can't be real," he told himself. "She must be behind my bad luck." Delusion gripped him. He refused to accept responsibility for his downfall. Instead, he festered in anger and bitterness, cursing her name. But blame didn't pay the bills. He moved out of his once lavish apartment in the dead of night, taking what few possessions he had left. He crashed on a friend's couch for a week, then hopped around cheap motels when even that friend grew tired of him. Stripped of his pride and resources, Bryan hit rock bottom with a force that left him reeling. And through it all, he kept hearing the same piece of gossip repeated everywhere. Kemi Adeola is unstoppable. One rainy afternoon, Bryan felt his phone buzz repeatedly. He checked his notifications and saw that his face was plastered all over social media. A clip had gone viral. Someone recorded him in a crowded bank lobby, on his knees, begging a loan officer for an extension on his defaulted payments. In the grainy video, he was disheveled, eyes wild with desperation, while other customers looked on. The caption read, "Former high-flyer Bryan Okoro falls from grace." Commenters flooded social media platforms with reactions. Some pitied him, but most were merciless. They reminded the public of how he had boasted about his success, how he treated people poorly, and how he lost everything. Speculation about his misuse of funds and alleged shady dealings surfaced. Kemi's name inevitably came up. Internet sleuths dug up old photos of the two together at fancy events, comparing them with the new images of Kemi's meteoric rise. The contrast was stark. While she was giving interviews in designer outfits, he was a viral sensation for all the wrong reasons. Bryan seethed at every ping of his phone. The humiliating video racked up millions of views, turning him into a cautionary tale. Journalists even wrote think pieces about how arrogance and financial mismanagement could topple the king of a cardboard empire. Late that night, in a cheap motel room with flickering lights, Bryan hurled his phone against the wall. He had lost everything: his company, his standing, and now even his dignity in the eyes of the public. Through the paper-thin walls, he could hear neighbors talking about how Kemi Adeola was hosting a charity gala for underprivileged children. "She's playing saint while I rot in this dump," he thought bitterly. Yet, no amount of anger changed the reality. The phone calls offering him business deals had dried up. Even the people who once called him a friend now ghosted him. He realized, with a sinking feeling, that he was truly alone. Exhausted, he sank onto the lumpy motel bed, the neon sign outside flashing erratically through the curtains. The question pounding in his head was the same one that thousands of internet users were asking. Would Bryan ever recover from this spectacular fall from grace? Unaware of the viral video at first, Kemi was busy finalizing a philanthropic project she had been nurturing. After stepping into her role as head of the Williams conglomerate, she identified a cluster of dilapidated buildings in an urban area notorious for domestic violence reports. She decided to purchase the land and turn it into a shelter for abused women, a place where they could receive therapy, legal aid, and job training. She hosted a press conference to announce the launch. Dressed in a simple but elegant outfit from Adeola Couture, she stood before reporters and cameras, her voice unwavering. "I know what it's like to feel powerless," she said. "I want this shelter to be a haven for those who think they have nowhere else to go." The unveiling ceremony was held at the renovated building, a bright and welcoming facility with a plaque at the entrance that read, "Hope Springs, a Kemi Adeola Foundation." Women's rights activists and community leaders attended, commending Kemi for her generosity and vision. After the ceremony, she roamed the halls, greeting staff members and future residents. The rooms were painted in warm colors, with comfortable furnishings and cozy reading nooks. She had spared no expense in ensuring that this space felt like a true sanctuary. As Kemi was about to leave, she glanced at her phone and saw dozens of messages from friends and business associates. Her eyes skimmed over a text from Folake. "You won't believe this, but Bryan is trending. The world finally sees his true colors." Kemi's heart skipped a beat. She clicked a link that led to the viral video, her expression shifting from curiosity to empathy. Seeing Bryan on his knees in public, begging for a loan, was shocking. Despite everything he had done, she found herself feeling a pang of pity. She knew all too well the pain of losing everything, even if his downfall was largely of his own making. Standing at the entrance of her shelter, Kemi made a silent vow to remain true to her values. She wouldn't gloat, she wouldn't stoop to cruelty. Instead, she would let her success and her philanthropic deeds speak for themselves. Yet, beneath that calm exterior, she felt a quiet satisfaction. Bryan had declared she would die without him. Now, here she was, opening a shelter in the very place where he once humiliated her. If that wasn't poetic justice, she didn't know what was. Kemi's philanthropic endeavors and the burgeoning success of her empire caught the attention of international investors. One day, she received a call from an influential Middle Eastern conglomerate that specialized in hospitality and technology. They proposed a joint venture that would expand her resorts worldwide, incorporating cutting-edge tech solutions for sustainable tourism. Curious, she flew to Dubai to meet with the company's representatives in a gleaming skyscraper overlooking the Persian Gulf. The boardroom was a polished space of glass and steel, exuding an air of global influence. A distinguished man in an impeccably tailored suit greeted her, introducing himself as Hassan Al-Faraj. "Miss Adeola, your business acumen and social consciousness have impressed us," he said, gesturing for her to sit. "We believe that working together, we can revolutionize the luxury resort industry." Kemi listened attentively as they presented data on eco-friendly initiatives, advanced security systems, and digital concierge services they wanted to merge into her resorts. The synergy between her brand's strong narrative of empowerment and their cutting-edge technology seemed promising. By the time the meeting ended, she was brimming with excitement. Negotiations would take months, but the initial agreement promised Kemi a seat on the board of directors and a stake that would catapult her into the ranks of the top 10 wealthiest women in Africa, if she wasn't already there. That evening, she relaxed in a lavish hotel suite, gazing out at the glittering city lights of Dubai. It all felt surreal. She remembered her younger self, who once dreamed of leaving the village to earn just enough money to support her family. Now, she was on the cusp of forging a partnership that could change the face of global hospitality. Folake called during her moment of reflection. "Girl, your face is everywhere. You're the talk of the town." Kemi couldn't help but laugh. Who would have believed it? Certainly not Bryan. At that mention, Folake's tone turned serious. "I heard rumors he's trying to contact you. Something about needing help." Kemi exhaled softly. "He hasn't reached out to me yet. But even if he does, I'm not sure what I would do." Folake didn't push, but she made her opinion clear. "If he dares crawl back after what he's done, remember everything you went through. Don't let pity blind you." Kemi nodded, staring out at the towering skyline. She wouldn't let pity cloud her judgment. But she also believed in second chances, at least for those who genuinely sought redemption. The real question, she wondered, was Bryan capable of real change? For now, her focus remained on the future. A future that glowed with promise, anchored by a global partnership that could redefine her, and the world's perception of what a visionary African woman could achieve. A few weeks after Kemi's deal in Dubai made headlines, she was in her penthouse office, reviewing proposals from a cluster of architects. She planned to renovate some older resort properties for maximum sustainability. Her schedule was packed, with back-to-back meetings and interviews. Suddenly, her assistant burst into the room, looking flustered. "Ma'am, there's a man in the lobby who insists on seeing you. He says his name is Bryan." A chill ran through Kemi. She hadn't heard from Bryan directly since the day she walked away from their marriage. She stood, smoothing her blazer. "Let him in," she said, her voice calm, though her heart fluttered. Moments later, Bryan stepped in, looking nothing like the arrogant, well-groomed businessman she once knew. His hair was unkempt, his clothes wrinkled, and dark circles shadowed his eyes. He clutched a battered briefcase, as though it contained all that remained of his life. Kemi rose from her chair, meeting his gaze with measured composure. "Bryan," she said, a slight tremor betraying her nerves. "It's been a while." He swallowed hard, eyes flicking around the luxurious office. A visible wave of shame and regret washed over him. "Kemi, I'm sorry for everything," he began, voice cracking. "I lost my company. Everyone turned on me. I don't know where else to go." She studied him, recalling how he once stood over her, hurling insults. "You said I'd die without you," she said quietly, referencing the words that haunted her for so long. "Yet, here you are, needing my help." Bryan's head hung low. "I was a fool. I let my pride and greed destroy what I had. Please, Kemi, I need you to forgive me." Kemi's mind whirred. Forgiveness? She had rebuilt her life from the ashes he left behind. She was no longer that timid girl he cast aside. She had to decide if mercy was possible, or even wise, when it came to a man like Bryan. For a moment, she considered her personal code. She remembered the battered women who would soon find refuge in her shelter, women who also bore scars from toxic relationships. She motioned to the chairs. "Sit down," she said softly. "Let's talk." Bryan exhaled in relief, dropping into the seat. As her eyes scanned the figure before her, she couldn't help noticing how small he seemed, like a balloon that had lost all its air. She took her seat behind the desk, hands folded. A flicker of sympathy crossed her heart. She recalled the countless nights she'd cried, longing for him to treat her better. Now, the tables had turned. Should she, help him? "Tell me everything," she said, preparing herself for the next revelation in the saga of their intertwined lives. Bryan poured out his woes, crippling debt, social disgrace, and the humiliating reality of couchsurfing just to keep a roof over his head. He spoke of how he had been too arrogant to accept help from anyone, how he realized too late that Kemi had been the best thing in his life. Kemi listened, expression unreadable. A wave of memories flooded her mind, the public humiliation he inflicted, the constant belittling, the day he declared she would die poor without him. Now, here he was, reduced to a broken shell. When he finally fell silent, she leaned back in her executive chair, regarding him calmly. "I see," she said. "And what do you expect from me?" Bryan's eyes brimmed with desperation. "A chance to start over. Maybe a job, or a small loan. Something to help me get back on my feet." The irony wasn't lost on her. He was begging for what she'd once begged for, simple respect, a measure of mercy. And now, she held all the power. She stood, gesturing for him to follow. Confused but hopeful, Bryan rose. She led him through the corridors of the corporate building, past displays of her fashion line, her resort expansions, and philanthropic projects. Finally, they arrived at the front entrance, where security guards stood by the revolving doors. "Everyone said I was nothing without you," Kemi said quietly, recalling the stinging humiliation she once endured. "But here we stand, with the world seeing who is truly powerless." Bryan's voice cracked. "I know I don't deserve kindness, but please." She raised a hand, silencing him. Her eyes were cold and resolute. "I want you to remember how you mocked me, how you tore me down every single day, how you kicked me out with nothing. You told me I'd die poor and forgotten. Does that ring a bell?" He swallowed hard, tears threatening to spill. The security staff exchanged uncertain glances, unsure if they should intervene. Kemi took a step closer, her voice echoing in the sleek marble foyer. "You had your chance. You threw it away. Now, you face the consequences of your choices." Bryan fell to his knees again, sobbing quietly. "I'm sorry. Please, I beg you." Without flinching, Kemi looked down at him. "You said I'd die without you. But I'm living better than ever. This is where our story ends." She gestured to the security guards, who walked over and firmly escorted Bryan to the door. His pleas echoed in the spacious lobby, a final, desperate refrain. Stepping back into the elevator, Kemi felt her heart racing. This was the revenge she never dreamed she'd have the power to carry out. Yet, no glee coursed through her veins. Instead, a somber realization. I won, but why doesn't it feel like victory? She had chosen a path that ensured Bryan couldn't hurt her again, a path that reaffirmed her sense of dignity. It was cold. It was final. The elevator doors slid shut, leaving him behind, and for once in her life, Kemi felt genuinely free. Despite the hollow feeling that lingered after Bryan's departure, Kemi pressed forward with her expanding empire. She decided to channel her resources into her ultimate dream, purchasing a private island. Scouring real estate listings across the globe, she found a small, breathtaking island off the coast of Africa. Lush greenery, crystal-clear waters, and secluded beaches. The property was already partially developed, with the potential for a luxury resort that would outshine anything in the region. Kemi assembled a team of architects and environmental experts. "I want this project to be both luxurious and sustainable," she declared, emphasizing her commitment to an eco-friendly footprint. "We'll use solar power, water recycling systems, and preserve the island's natural habitat as much as possible." Her vision was grand, an elite luxury resort and retreat center that would serve as a haven for those seeking tranquility, but also a place where philanthropic retreats could happen. Leaders, activists, and entrepreneurs from around the world could gather to brainstorm solutions to social and environmental challenges. Construction began swiftly. Kemi frequently visited the island, supervising everything from the design of overwater bungalows to the eco-friendly landscaping of native plants. She found solace there, strolling barefoot on the sand at sunrise, listening to the rhythmic lull of the ocean. The island stood as a stark contrast to the noise and chaos of the city, and to the tumultuous chapter of her past life. Her staff noticed a change in her demeanor whenever she landed on the island, an unmistakable serenity that glowed from within. Even her philanthropic directors commented, "Madam, you seem to have truly found your center here." Kemi smiled at that. "Maybe I have, she would reply. It's a reminder that no matter how high we climb, we should always be grounded in peace and purpose. News of the island project broke across social media, prompting even more international attention. Some criticized her for opulence, but most applauded her for creating jobs and pushing the boundaries of sustainable luxury tourism. Standing atop a newly built wooden deck that extended over the turquoise water, Kemi felt the gentle breeze on her face. She closed her eyes, reflecting on how far she'd come, from the dusty roads of Abulori to standing on her private paradise. If this was a dream, she never wanted to wake up. Once the island resort was operational, Kemi announced a special initiative: quarterly retreats exclusively for women who had survived abuse. She funded these trips entirely, inviting women from across the globe to spend a week in a nurturing environment, free from judgment and full of supportive programs. These retreats featured therapy sessions, wellness activities, and skill-building workshops run by experts. Kemi partnered with psychologists, career coaches, and other inspirational figures to create a holistic program aimed at rebuilding self-worth and opening up economic opportunities for survivors. "Your story is not over," Kemi told the group of women during the first retreat. They sat in a circle on a sun-drenched beach, listening to the rhythmic rush of waves. "I was once told I would die without a man who claimed to own my destiny. Look at me now," she said softly. "I'm living proof that you can transcend any darkness." Tears and smiles intermingled among the group. One woman from South Africa spoke up, voice trembling. "I left my abusive husband with nothing but the clothes on my back. Coming here, hearing your story, I finally believe I can rebuild my life." Kemi felt her heart swell. She knew that this work, the chance to help others heal, was the true measure of her success. An empire built solely on financial gains felt hollow if it didn't improve lives or spark a wave of empowerment. Word of the retreats spread rapidly. Activists and celebrities commended her, while international organizations requested partnerships. The Kemi Adeola Foundation became synonymous with transformation and hope. Donations and sponsorships poured in, allowing her to expand the program. In a televised interview, a prominent talk show host asked her, "Why focus so heavily on abused women?" Kemi smiled gently. "Because I've been there. I know how it feels to be broken. I also know the power of having just one person believe in you, support you, and open a door to a better future. If we can do that for even one woman, we've changed a life. And every life matters." Amid the applause that followed, Kemi felt that familiar sense of peace. She no longer needed Bryan's acceptance or anyone's approval to validate her worth. She had carved her own path, and in doing so, was paving roads for countless others to follow. It was during the third Women's Empowerment Retreat on her island that Kemi crossed paths with Idris, a self-made tech entrepreneur from Kenya. He was invited as a guest speaker to share insights on how technology could help women launch online businesses. Tall, with a gentle smile and warm eyes, Idris was the epitome of quiet confidence. Unlike men she'd met before, he did not boast about his achievements. Instead, he listened intently, offering thoughtful solutions to the challenges women in the program faced. Kemi first noticed him when he eloquently explained how a single smartphone and an internet connection could open global markets to artisans and small-scale producers. "It's not about making millions overnight," he said. "It's about empowering one family, one community at a time." Intrigued, Kemi approached him after the session. "Thank you for coming," she said. "You've inspired so many with your ideas." Idris gave a humble nod. "I'm honored to be here. You're doing incredible work. The way you use your resources to uplift others is remarkable." In that moment, something about his sincerity drew her in, his lack of pretense, his genuine respect for her mission. Over the following days, they found themselves gravitating toward each other, sharing meals and strolling along the beach after the workshops ended. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon in a blaze of orange and pink, they sat on a wooden bench near the shore. The ocean breeze ruffled Kemi's hair. Idris spoke softly. "You amaze me, Kemi. Most people, when they come into large fortunes, focus solely on living lavishly. But you've built a foundation, shelters, and an entire island retreat for the vulnerable." She shrugged, feeling her cheeks warm. "Money is just a tool. It can build or destroy, depending on who wields it. He smiled, a gentle curve of his lips. I've seen so many resources wasted on empty vanity projects. You're one of the few using it for good. Silence settled, but it was a comfortable one. Kemi felt a flutter in her chest, a familiar sensation she hadn't felt in a long time, hope tinged with attraction. She mentally reminded herself to be cautious, to recall how easily she had been manipulated before. But Idris was different. Over the weeks that followed, he returned to the island for follow-up sessions, and each time they grew closer. He never pushed, never forced his presence, never made her feel inadequate. Instead, he supported her vision, applauded her accomplishments, and offered constructive ideas without overstepping. For the first time since leaving Bryan, Kemi allowed herself to entertain the idea of real love, one founded on respect, trust, and shared purpose. With Idris, she felt safe. She felt seen. And in her eyes, that was the most priceless gift of all. Kemi's love life blossomed in tandem with her growing influence. She and Idris became a power couple in the tech and hospitality sectors, frequently collaborating on initiatives that spanned multiple African countries. Whenever they appeared at international summits or charity galas, photographers captured their warm smiles and the genuine affection that gleamed between them. Together, they launched a startup incubator focused on supporting female entrepreneurs in rural areas. Through low-interest microloans, mentorship programs, and access to digital tools, countless women discovered pathways to financial independence. For Kemi, seeing these women stand tall, brimming with newfound confidence, felt more rewarding than any business triumph. Media outlets hailed her as an icon of hope. Documentaries were made about her journey, from a battered wife who slept on a friend's couch to a billionaire philanthropist. She was featured in Time magazine's list of the 100 most influential people in the world. Pop culture references abounded. Some artists even wrote songs praising her resilience. Kemi's philanthropic efforts also expanded beyond women's empowerment. She funded educational programs in remote villages, installed solar panels in schools lacking electricity, and partnered with environmental organizations to preserve natural habitats around her island. The ripple effect of her actions was immeasurable. During a major international conference on women in leadership, Kemi stepped onto a stage before thousands. Idris watched from the front row, pride glowing in his eyes. She wore a regal gown from Adeola Couture, its design blending African prints with modern elegance. She began her speech, voice resonating with passion. I was once told I would never survive without a man by my side. My journey taught me that true power comes from within, and no one can take that from you unless you let them. Thunderous applause reverberated through the auditorium. She continued, we must break the chains of societal expectations that limit our daughters, our sisters, our mothers. We must give them the tools to build their own destinies and stand on their own 2 feet. In that moment, Kemi felt an immense surge of gratitude, for the dark days that shaped her resilience, for the fortune bestowed by Mrs. Williams that allowed her to become a catalyst for change, and for every woman who found her voice through Kemi's organizations. By the time she ended her speech, the crowd rose for a standing ovation. She looked at Idris, tears glistening in both their eyes. Her legacy was no longer just about personal triumph. It had become a global movement, one that transcended borders and shattered the chains of oppression. In the dawn's early light, Kemi walked alone along the pristine shoreline of her private island. Seagulls circled overhead, and the tide gently lapped at her feet, erasing her footprints as she moved forward. She paused at a particular rock formation, breathing in the salty air. A new day was beginning, and with it, infinite possibilities. She reflected on her life's winding journey, the village upbringing, the leaps of faith, the heartbreak and betrayal, the stroke of destiny that catapulted her to unimaginable heights, and the hard work she poured into transforming a gift into a global force for good. Far behind her, the luxurious resort gleamed in the distance, where early rising guests stretched on yoga mats or sipped fresh fruit smoothies. Every pillar, every bungalow, every tree that was preserved told a story, her story, of resilience and renewal. She closed her eyes, letting the sun's first rays warm her face. She remembered the quiet night she left Bryan, clutching nothing but her resolve to survive. She remembered her first days sleeping on Folake's couch, filled with uncertainty. She remembered the letter from Mrs. Williams, and how it changed everything. Now, as the waves rolled in and out in a soothing cadence, Kemi felt genuinely at peace. She was no longer the girl who second-guessed her worth, no longer the woman who allowed others to diminish her dreams. She was a titan in the business world, a philanthropist championing the cause of abused women, and a beacon of inspiration for anyone who had ever been told they were nothing. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, a message from Idris, letting her know he was on a flight to join her for the weekend. She smiled. Love, respect, partnership, these were the treasures she once thought she'd never find. Yet, in that tranquil moment, standing alone at the water's edge, she realized she didn't need anyone to complete her. She had already found completeness within herself. Idris simply added to her life's fullness, just like she added to his. Turning her gaze back to the horizon, she watched as the sun broke free from the ocean, flooding the sky with radiant light. In that brilliance, she felt her purpose burn bright. She had built a life that surpassed her wildest childhood dreams. And in doing so, she proved to the world, and most importantly to herself, that she was more than capable of living, thriving, and ruling without the shackles of a toxic past. And so the story came full circle. She now stood on her island, watching the sunrise alone, in peace, power, and purpose. In the gentle hush of morning, she realized that the greatest victory wasn't amassing fortune or fame. It was the quiet certainty of knowing who she was and owning her narrative. She had faced death by another's definition and chosen life by her own. I'm glad you made it to the end. I hope you enjoyed the story.